From solipsism to white agency, I am going to talk about how we get from the solipsistic view to a view of agency, because people don't seem to understand the solipsistic barrier that exists between the subjective and the so-called objective. We have only the subjective, and objectivity is a theory based on a subset of our subjective experiences. People just don't get this. A lot of people in philosophy admit this problem and they go, therefore we have to make a leap of faith. No, we don't make leaps of faith. We reason it out. All right. First of all, solipsism. Here we are in the Cartesian theater. It's not a perfect metaphor, certainly, and we will focus in on that if we get to that level of understanding. But here's the idea, is that I have a subjectivity. The subjectivity here is drawn like a guy sitting in a theater, but obviously it's not literally that. But there's this idea of a subjective observer. That's the feeling that we have, okay? Now if we look at another person, this is still solipsism. We're watching a homosexual man make an egg instead of ourselves, right? Okay. Now when we get agency is when we come up with the idea that, oh look, that guy has this subjective experience as well inside his head. But the fact is that that's in our head still. We're picturing. Anytime we have the feeling that of him experiences his subjective feeling, like he burns himself up with that pan and goes ouch, and you feel like, oh, a sympathetic, mirror neuron kind of sensation, that's still in our head. We're experiencing that subjectivity through our model of him, which is our subjective model of him. All right, so the question is about solipsism and agency, and how do they relate? How can we get from one to the other? How do we get back and forth like we want to, because we do have these mirror neurons, and we feel that, yes, these really are valid assumptions. So how do we sketch that out? How do we triangulate the similarity between our experience and his, when all we have is this barrier of subjective models on one side, and then theories about perceptions on the behavioral side? Well, there is a way to relate them, and this is in perception or empiricism, because both of them have components that take place in perception and empiricism. That is, we have perceptions of self and we have perceptions of the other. The agency is going to be related to the behavior of the other, and the solipsism is the behavior of the self. And both of these are perceptual. We have perceptions of self, we have perceptions of agency. So they share a domain like that. Yeah! Now if we, this is exciting. Now if we set up an experiment like this, where we have the self, we look at the other. We also look at a camera pointed at the other and a camera pointed at the self. With this model, these two cameras output images of self and other. And then we can ignore the camera process and we have images internalized of self and other like this. And through these triangulations, these three observations, we can come up with a model of this, what's going on. And the links will be different, with elements related. So you end up with a subjective material model of agency like this. The self sees itself as connected. It sees the camera seeing itself, and the camera saw it itself, so there's a bidirectional connection between the self and this camera image of itself. Similarly, by watching the other and the images of the other, we believe there's a relationship back and forth between those two. And then because the self-image and the other image have a lot of similarity, we believe that there's a relationship between these two relationships. So burn that into your memory, at least the fact that I believe this model, that I present this model, when you're talking about how it's not well sorted out.